Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending this panel. Today, we're going to talk about how to master on-chain data for growth. Of course, there's kind of many ways we could take this, but I think what we're going to try to do today is kind of like take the non-technical approach. I'm sure all of my panelists here, we could go really deep and we could talk about like how to index the chain correctly and like all of the technical nerdy stuff, but it's like the on-chain data actually kind of is the economic activity that happens on these blockchains, right? And we're all trying to eventually earn money with protocols, or like we're building something and we're hoping that people use it. And the surface area for that is most likely a chain, at least if you're building in Web3. And then on that chain, we produce a lot of data. So how can we use that data to kind of drive our growth marketing campaigns? How can we drive our growth? How can we track growth? We're going to try to dive into that in this panel. And for this panel, I have wonderful panelists, I guess. With me, I have Shaun, who's the CMO at Chainflip Labs. And maybe, Shaun, if you just quickly want to introduce Chainflip Labs so everyone kind of like gets the context of like what you work on.
Sure. So Chainflip Labs is a cross-chain decentralized exchange. Essentially, we do native Bitcoin, native Solana, and native Ethereum as our main chains. And we do those native swaps, so no bridging or wrapping or anything like that. And why it's super unique is because we utilize on-chain data for all these different chains that aren't normally connected. So it's quite a problem with on-chain data that we're trying to solve from that side on a marketing perspective. Yeah. Yep.
And Shaun works with his data every day. He's the CMO, so like he needs to know what his users are doing, how's the protocol doing, how much volume are you doing today, is number going up or is number going down? So really looking forward to your insights. With me also I have Kofi, who's a senior data scientist at Base. I don't really think Base needs much of an introduction, but maybe Kofi, kind of like what's your day-to-day work at Base in like one sentence?
Yeah, so the summary for anybody who might be unfamiliar, Base is the layer 2 blockchain that we're building at Coinbase. Coinbase being, of course, the big exchange. And we make your transactions a lot faster and cheaper. So we're doing a lot of work to analyze how our ecosystem is growing and how we can grow it better so that we can bring the whole world on chain.
All right. And the last panel is Rafa, who's the co-founder at Numia. And maybe Numia, I don't think rings a bell for a lot of people. So Rafa, what is Numia?
Yeah, we do need an introduction because we do a lot of the piping for blockchain data. Basically, we're a company, a data provider. We sit across the whole data stack, and we provide data for partners like Dune and other customers, mostly on the Cosmos ecosystem, but like we're moving to other ecosystems now. So we know a little bit about why Web3 data sucks.
Yes. Rafa and me could have a very long conversation about the state of on-chain data and how to index it, but that's not the purpose here. I'm Florian. I've been with Dune for 4 years. I did DevRel there for a long time, and now I do product management, mostly kind of focusing on like engineering on-chain data so other people can actually use it because raw data is really hard. But yeah, in this panel, we'll try to kind of go from separating signal from noise. So like, what is the stuff that's out there, and what are kind of good metrics, what are bad metrics, and kind of like, okay, what are the hidden opportunities? So maybe what is something that is unique to this panel? What have our panelists kind of like, what are their main things that they look at? And then we'll also look at kind of like, if you launch marketing campaigns, like what are the actual things that you should set up? What should you be able to track? So that's kind of like our journey for today. But first of all, I just came up with this question. I think it's going to be interesting to see the answers. How's this industry doing in dealing with on-chain data? With one, like nobody uses data at all, and we're completely flying blind. And 10, we have a contract with Palantir. Like, maybe Shaun, if you want to go first.
On a scale from 1 to 10, I feel like it's at like a 5 at the moment. However, I feel like it's become way more important now, more so than ever. Specifically to my whole idea of, the whole industry is kind of moving away from pure speculation to a lot more like revenue generation, proper businesses, understanding their users and how to tap into that. And because of that, you're getting a lot more people focusing on data, because a lot of projects are not just focusing on one kind of metric here or one sort of value, such as we're a cross-chain swapping exchange, but all these other products are coming in, like Coinbase releasing all these different products. And because of that, understanding users and how they interact with those different products and how, these different segments work, it's becoming more and more important. So we're seeing a lot more focus on data now, which is super exciting. I feel like we're in like this kind of golden zone at the moment to take data by the horns.
Yeah, I think that most crypto startups probably sit at a 3. Because there's just a lot of people who they're now entering the first stage of actually tracking anything, like just building up your instrumentation and analytics to track how is the product going at all, let alone getting to the next stage of let's actually do experimentation and see whether or not this campaign that we're starting or this initiative that we're starting is actually moving the needle or making an impact, and getting into sort of deeper analysis around that. But it means that we have a long way to go, but we're also in a great industry for data scientists. The fact that you can track everything, not just about your product, but about all of your competitors throughout time, forever, and everything is open, means that we have the potential to do way crazier stuff than Web 2 data scientists get to do. But people are only really starting to explore what's possible.
I'm also on the negative side of things. I think we're like a 2.5. But mostly because I just don't see like many projects talking about the metrics that matter to me, at least. Like I come from the Web 2 space, did a bunch of data science there, and like Web 2 was like all about LTV, efficiency, CAC. And here like nobody thinks about LTV. Like but we all are supposed to run profitable companies, right? And there's Web3 is magical because the data is there for everybody to look into. I think the problem has been mostly like it's a data engineering problem. Like it's very hard to dig in. I feel like there are tools like Dune and other folks have done great things for the ecosystem. But I think for a normal marketer, it's still like a little bit of a burden to just like make a sense out of the cross-chain mess, the different coin types that we have for wallets. Like, what the hell is that for a marketer that comes from like the Web3 space where they didn't think about cookies? That was solved, right? So I think we're pretty early here. There's a lot to do. Yeah.
There's a lot of variants, even in this panel. I think like we asked, like if we were to assess the Chainflip team or the base team, like you're probably at different levels, and like I don't know either of your work enough to be like, okay, you're probably at a 9 or at an 8. But I think just in the industry, there's a lot of variants where like some teams have just set up like their DeFi Llama. They have their DeFi Llama integrations, and they're like, yeah, TVL is good. And it's like, yeah, but they're just farming your protocol. Like what? Like it doesn't get you anything in the long term. So yeah, there's a lot of variants where like you could actually kind of like make something out of the user data that gets generated, but there's a lot of potential that's oftentimes left untapped. But yeah, that is a good bridge into our first topic, which is separating signal from noise. So maybe what's a specific example where active users are misleading? Because like active users is still like, hey, my blockchain has whatever, like 500,000 active users. So maybe like that, just like to get the first like giant misconception out of the room. What do we think is like the first thing? And maybe Rafa, you go first.
Yeah, I think we've been hearing this the whole day. I feel like there's a lot of focus on the hype metrics, which in Web 2 we used to call them vanity metrics, of like just looking at your chart of like users going up. People will like put this chart in Web 2 of cumulative active users, which is absurd, right? And I feel TVL is kind of like the same, but nobody knows like really like what's the average transaction per user, like what the average revenue per user that you're generating, or what's the retention of your top cohort, like. So I feel this focus on like vanity metrics, just active wallets, which also is hard in crypto because you cannot distinguish bots versus actual users. So I think this over-indexing on these like vanity metrics is just it's a focus on the wrong energy, I feel, for everyone. So so many opinions, but I'm gonna also let everybody else speak a little bit.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to active user metrics, we're in a harder scenario than most Web2 data scientists because we are in a adversarial space. What I mean by that is that if you're working on a product like Base, which is a blockchain that has a bunch of apps building on it, you can't just look at your active user metric and say, oh, these are all real people who are using apps on Base, because there's a financial incentive to try and skew metrics in different ways to make some projects look better than others, because if a project looks good in the metrics, that can have financial implications. A good example of a time when the active user metrics for Base were very skewed was around the start of the year. I noticed one day I opened up one of the dashboards internally, and there was this huge spike in the middle of January of just active users going to the moon. And who you'd like to look at that and think, oh my God, we're doing so great. Like we can all get a pat on the back and go on vacation early. But I looked into it deeper, and what I found was we were getting a lot of activity from a specific bot network that was selling services where they would spin up thousands of wallets and then make micro purchases of a token, so that on metrics dashboards, it would look like, oh, that token has so many traders, it's so popular, to sort of lure other traders to buy in, so that it would go up so that they could then dump on them. And this is not a problem that usually people have in like Web2 apps. I mean, if somebody is using your meal delivery app, they're not trying to trick other users into believing that burgers are going up today. Like, you don't have that same sort of issue to deal with. And so we've got to be a lot more selective when we look at something like active wallets or active users, and do a lot of labeling and figure out not just did they make a transaction, but what type of person are they? What type of behavior are they exhibiting? Is this a behavior we want to reward, or is this a behavior that's negative for other users and thus negative for the network? So yeah, you've got to dig a lot deeper.
Yeah, that's a really good take. I think it kind of lines into kind of where the on-chain tracking is at the moment. Like for example, for us, we don't have a specific incentive program or anyone to use our platform for swapping. And I feel like a lot of other protocols have this incentive to just kind of, trick for transactions. And it doesn't happen in the sense that you explain for Web2, but, from like a Web2 VC perspective even, like making it look like you'd have more users coming, it makes it look good for VCs, it makes a project look good. But as the protocol itself, these aren't users that are actually using your platform, which is just not good. And I think like it comes down to where we're just a bit early at the moment with being able to correctly, or maybe not too early, just maybe we're not exploring this enough, is like getting down to what an active user actually is, and getting all these different wallets connected to one source, and then kind of collaborating all of that together and being like, okay, cool, this active user has over 15, 20 different wallets that are all connected to that one wallet, and then we know that that's one. We have a situation where we have, active users that have, 4 or 5 different wallets on Bitcoin, a couple on Solana, a couple on Ethereum, and it's really difficult when you start moving across chains to just collaborate this to one person. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that metric. I really think it has potential, but yeah, it needs a lot of work, which it seems like you guys are doing, which is cool.
And maybe just to add on that, like a standard problem that maybe most of you know is you will see if you have an analytics tool installed on your front end, and you're also a DeFi protocol with a smart contract, and then you go and look at the transactions and users on your front end versus the smart contract, they will never match. Or to some degree, sometimes they won't match, right? And there's this challenge where you have to figure out like, okay, what's like, what are the differences? Is it bots? Is it like something else? And that has been a problem with like customers we've been dealing with as well.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing in this industry is also that we're living in this panopticon. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that term, but it's like everyone is able to see everything. So like the problem that Kofi mentioned, where it's like people are kind of intentionally falsifying metrics, which then in turn, like if you are on the receiving end of that, if you're the base chain, and like now like there's a bunch of airdrop farmers on base chain, but like how do you like you need to like deal with the whole stack of problems, and like people are intentionally kind of faking metrics because in other places those metrics might be very relevant. So like if I'm a token, or like I have a token and I want that token to look like it's kind of like it has a broad distribution of holders, or like a lot of traders, or a lot of volume, then suddenly it's like, okay, I'm the DEX that people are wash trading a token on, and now I'm like, okay, like these are not real users. So like there's so much kind of nuance to this, where it's like there really isn't one great metric, I feel like. So it's always like a amalgamation of metrics maybe. So and then that's kind of like separating the signal from the noise. So what are like maybe in the case of like I run a protocol, I've actually built something. So Shaun, what is something that your team actually looks at?
Yeah, I think we're super lucky, I feel, because our core product is just doing cross-chain swaps at the moment. So we look at total volume, and we look at the total number of swaps combined together to get a general sense of how our status is going. If we see a large uptick in volume, but we still kind of see like this kind of stagnant drop off of the number of swaps from our integrators as well as our own front end, we kind of get a general sense that we're not growing in that aspect. We might just have some specific whales that have just come used to our protocol and use that. But if we see like a general uptick in those metrics, it's kind of a good sign that we're moving in the right direction. That's on the swapping side. We do have some other products involved in it too. So we've got a liquidity provision product, a native Bitcoin yield product. I'm not chilling, but those are quite easy to track because those are signups and people depositing money in that's active capital that's getting used to provide liquidity and to actually earn yield. So that's a lot more easy to understand, but it comes down to more on the swapping side that becomes a little bit more tricky to focus on.
And in your work as a CMO, you use these metrics to kind of be like, okay, this is how my marketing campaigns are going? Like, is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think a good way to look at it is, if we're doing a campaign for our boosted yield product or our Bitcoin yield product, and we launch a campaign, we can easily take a snapshot before the campaign and say, okay, cool, here we are. We run the campaign and just kind of getting people incentivized. Well, not incentivized, just get people interested to use their Bitcoin to earn some yield. And we can kind of track, how that progress has gone. We use another kind of data tracking tool called Plausible. It's not like infringing on GDPR or anything. We don't track people's specific information. It's just at the moment we're just tracking signups, and from signups we're tracking, okay, this wallet joined, he deposited X amount from a custom UTM of a campaign that we did, and we can kind of go from there. Yeah.
Okay, very happy to hear you are following EU regulations. Very important.
We got him, man. I knew you would like that.
Yeah, funny match. It's not like you're not protecting privacy or anything. You're just like, yeah, the laws are intact. So that's the product version, and it's like, I think like what I hear is like these are very specific metrics, and then you track these very specific metrics. Like like users are going up, this is great, but like okay, like what does earn us money, and how do I track what earns us money? Like what are the leading kind of indicators for that, and then like how do we actually earn money?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kofi, I think your problem is a lot more multi-dimensional because you got a whole chain to analyze. So maybe what are kind of your tips and tricks, or like your best approaches to finding out like is base sustainably growing, or is this kind of all bots?
Yeah, so to sort of figure out how much of the growth is real or not, we do a lot of cutting. So you start with a metric like monthly active users, and what you're trying to get to is something that we call quality monthly active users. So we have all of these heuristics for how do we cut that number down to folk who are actually high retention and have a lot of activity and have some amount of balance. They're not just spam on the network, as well as of course attempting to cut out not necessarily bad actors, but automated actors that skew the metrics. So this is a high-frequency trading bot, or this is some MEV searcher, something that isn't exactly the user that we're going for. And so you try and do all of your scoping down to get that quality monthly active user metric, and then you slice it down more, saying, okay, again, coming back to the labeling, let's do some labeling work. Let's figure out of the people who we call our quality monthly active users, are these retail DEX traders, where mostly what they do is they're trading small cap tokens on DEXs? Are they interested in NFTs? Are they taking out loans? What exactly are they doing? Where are they coming from? So one of the big differences with a chain versus an app is that when you build an app, you have a lot of control over your user flow. Like, your user signs up here, this is the first thing they see, this is the next feature that they use. But on a chain with a bunch of different apps and a bunch of different bridges in and out, people can show up however they like. And so we need to figure out, we work backwards. We see a user and then we need to figure out what their flow was. So this quality monthly active user, how did they get their first funding? Was it from a centralized exchange? Was it from a bridge? Did a friend send them money? How did they become activated? What was the first app that they used, the first app that they saw? And so we have to not only sort of create the better metric, but then we need to go back and figure out what was the flow of activities like for these different types of users, so that then we can, make better decisions about how to attract more of the type of users that we want, or get rid of some of the users that we don't, well, not get rid of, but disincentivize some of the users that we don't want, and actually make decisions that will be good for Base.
I've actually got a question on that. When you say disincentivize, is that an active thing, or is it just you just don't focus on them?
Yeah, more like don't focus on them.
Okay.
So not that we're, Base is open to everybody. Everybody will get fast, cheap transactions on Base. You're not going to get any penalty for doing something that we, don't align with. I mean, the great thing about blockchain is that we couldn't penalize you even if we wanted to, because we have censorship resistance. We cannot and will not, disallow your transactions from completing or doing anything like that. And so it's more just a matter of, if we are trying to build features, or start campaigns, or work with people to create incentives, how do we make sure that those benefits are going to folk who are good for the network, as opposed to folk who are bad for the network?
Yeah, I see. And Rafa, you're kind of like a Web 2 builder in some sense, or you have some history there, but you're also now very active in the Web 3, how to index all of these chains. So maybe what are some, is there some back to the basics things that you would like to see all of the protocols and the chains and stuff like that adopt?
Yeah, I'm a bit opinionated about the whole attribution topic, which again in Web 2 was a sole thing, right? Everybody would know how much of my LTV came from a Facebook campaign, Google paid, whatever. And if you ask protocols, L1s, and okay, do you know where liquidity is coming from? And it's either really hard to answer or nobody has an answer. And the attribution side of things in Web3 is very interesting, because there's in my head 2 layers. You have the Web 2 layer of where are the actual users coming from to your protocol, from Twitter, or some campaign that you're running on some ad network. But also there's the on-chain level of hey, where did the liquidity come from? Was it from Coinbase and then to a smart contract and then to another chain and then to you? And I think marketers should be able to solve or to answer the questions at both levels. And I would love to see more this attribution thinking that we had in Web 2, because again, on the on-chain level, going back to your point of everything's open, you can know if imagine we work with wallets, so we kind of there's this new thing where Addressable has been talking a lot about this cost per wallet, trying to acquire wallets and knowing what they clicked, and then if you know what they click, you potentially can track all the downstream analytics, because the data is on chain. And not only what happens on your protocol, but also after my protocol, where did they go? Like, did they go to a competitor maybe, or did they take the liquidity out and went somewhere else? And all that data is like, it's there. So like, I struggle sometimes like with frustration of like, hey, it's everything there, but like, we're not using it enough. And I guess my whole point is really that like on-chain data is so powerful and we should just use it more.
Yeah. I don't know if this will actually be relevant to the next question, but I do want to hop on that a little bit in terms of the going back to the basics topic, because I do think that there are a lot of teams that could really benefit from studying Web 2 growth accounting in terms of just measuring very basic stuff. How many of your users are new? How many of them are returning? How many of them are resurrected? Just basic growth accounting is something that a lot of teams that I previously worked with as a data science contractor weren't really up to date on and needed help with, and something that we're very serious about on Base. Of course, doing the growth accounting and again, scoping down, doing the filtering and all of that, but just, starting from the Web 2, the meat and potatoes basics before sort of jumping into all of the crazy stuff we need to do in crypto.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like analysis paralysis, really. You have so much data that's available to you, but we're just not starting at the basics to actually tackle it. Yeah, I can resonate with that too. From our side too, there's so many different ways you can attribute who a user is, but sometimes it's just important to figure out, you don't need to know everything about that user. We're not at the stage of figuring out what a customer lifetime value is just yet, but like we can at least start making steps in the right direction to get there. Yeah.
So we're almost at the end of the panel. So what are some like pre-launch best practices that like, what would you like, if you want to launch a campaign tomorrow, what is the kind of like infrastructure they need to set up before to even be able to track that campaign? Or like, what would you, like if your marketer or your product manager comes to you and it's like, I'm gonna launch a new product tomorrow, what would your kind of initial response be? And maybe Kofi go first.
So I mean, I would always start with, what's the goal of this project that we're trying to do, this campaign, of this initiative? What are you actually trying to achieve? Because it sounds basic, right? But you work with other technical engineers and product managers, and people like building things that they're interested in. It's like, oh, this is a great idea. This would be very cool. This would be awesome. But you need to come back to, how is this actually going to move the needle for us? What's the goal? What exactly are we going to track in order to see whether or not we've achieved that goal? And let's start from the basics, the metric that we're talking about, what does it look like now? So we've got a baseline. We're going to track how it changes during this campaign, this initiative, this launch, how it changes afterwards, so that we can see, was the goal actually achieved? Because you don't want a scenario where somebody comes to you 3 months after they launched some feature or some product, some initiative, and they say, well, can you crunch the data and tell me whether or not it worked? It's like, now it's too late. We should have started this process 7 months ago. That's always what I'll say.
Yeah. Rafa, you actually launched some campaigns because like part of Numia is also an ad business, or like you work together with wallets to play out ads. So maybe can you share an example of a campaign there and how that went?
Yeah, super briefly, I forgot to mention that in the intro actually, which are pretty relevant, but we also we sit across the whole stack, including marketing solutions, and we work with wallets and the Cosmos ecosystem, and they basically put ads there. And the cool thing about Web3 data is that you permissionlessly can create segments because, we know the activity of the wallet, so we're able to put really relevant messages in the wallet of a user who's interested in perps, has specific volume, in the past, or specific tokens in the balance, or history with tokens. So you can actually get really sophisticated on the targeting. And once you do, we have click rates, really not exaggerating, I'm really not exaggerating, between 7 and 12% sometimes when you do it well. And that traffic from a wallet is so valuable for a project, right? So I think, again, Addressable has been talking a lot about this, and I really like their tone and narrative. I think that we're gonna move a lot more in that direction. And again, the cool thing about these campaigns is that you can also track the on-chain attribution and start giving a little bit more about these metrics of hey, your campaign has this ROAS or ROI, or again, the metrics that to some degree were almost only Web 2, but it looks like it's changing now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting that now people are kind of starting to figure all of this out. And I think to summarize this panel, because we've run out of time, Web3 data is very complicated. We've kind of like scratched the surface area here of like what you can do with it. And my advice for anyone would really be like, go talk to a pro, like get yourself some help, like actually set up a data strategy, because those things really matter. You can't improve what you don't track, right? So it's like, you can't just go, like, you can't be a business without tracking your metrics. And like if your business happens on chain, like you should be able to like tell what the chain is telling you, and like use everything that you can, which is like, we live in this panopticon, you can see all of your users, you can see all the stats of your users, so like use that to your advantage. And I think like there's marketing agencies, there's whole products, and like I'm not gonna show anyone in specific, but there's a whole industry of data people that are emerging, and I think there's huge alpha to be gained currently to like properly kind of work with those people to form a good data strategy, and then eventually kind of integrate that into your own org. There's a lot of people who have like they've worked with a lot of teams, like Kofi was working with a bunch of teams, and like he takes that knowledge from protocol to protocol to protocol to protocol. So it's like, you don't have to start at zero. There's like lots of people out there who are good at this now, and you can really kind of like fast track your whole data strategy by working with capable freelancers. Of course, it costs money, but you want to earn money in the end, so you got to spend some.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're done, or is there Q&A?
Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one last question from the audience. Maybe we can squeeze it in. Is there someone? Yes, super.
I had a question in terms of the AI agents also entering like the on-chain space right now, right? The on-chain can be the railways for them. So I wanted to ask whether, first of all, from a protocols perspective, if there is some type of on-chain SEO that you're considering for those agents. From perspective of Kofi, you mentioned about like distinguishing key users from non-key users. Those agents will be active, but how you make sure that this agent is something that is not spamming transactions, but actually engaging with the entire ecosystem. So I just wanted to understand from your guys' perspective how you look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about agent SEO, because I mean, we have a good view of how this will work based on what we already have. Even before all of the current hype around AI that we're seeing at the moment, we've always had activity on chain from automated agents in the form of high-frequency traders. The high-frequency traders might not be using AI, maybe in the past, and now they would be using more of like hard-coded algorithms to figure out where they want to go and what they want to do. But maybe AI replaces some of that hard-coded work that's been done. And when it comes to the SEO side of things, of like how do you attract those kinds of players, crypto is very different in the sense that they can see your full truth. So there's no like narrative or something that you can sort of put out there to attract these agents or these bots or whatever we want to call them. You need to have real volume. Like a high frequency trader bot will only come to your trading protocol if there's already a lot of people trading there, if there's a lot of assets of value, if there's actually something for them to extract, because they're always looking for opportunities. So in the end, it really comes down to, do you have a product where there are opportunities for an automated agent to find value for itself while contributing back to the network? And that's how you end up with a scenario where you've got a lot of good automated agents participating in your system, right? So yeah, it's something that it really is one of those scenarios where if you build it right, they will come. But it's less about it's less about narrative and more about actually creating opportunities on chain.
On the protocol side, I think it's similar with our protocol particularly, because we also attracting liquidity providers and market makers, and they do have a pretty robust kind of high frequency bot system in their place. Not from a perspective of the AI side of things just yet, but what I have been seeing a lot of people talking about from an AI agent side is kind of developing like an AI agent aggregator of sorts, where it's like you've seen a lot of it during the initial hype, is just having having an AI agent, managing your investments or something like that, and connecting a cross-chain protocol or something like that to activate the swaps and to find the best and cheapest routes in order for you to move to where you need to move. I think that's really cool, but I think it does come down to just, if you build your side of the infrastructure, this will naturally just come, I feel. We're already down that path and people are experimenting so heavily with it that I just feel like it's kind of the natural way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.